This chalice, lit, extinguished, twice a week, every week. Tiredness, confusion. So often what is good, what is exciting, what is revolutionary is cut down before it bears fruit. The tragic hero, the passionate, defeated by spite and cynicism. Hopelessness. Is it all to the wind? O not lux de lumine, light from light, light born from light, from a source of insight, bring brightness and growth to the seedling that is our soul. Breathe gently upon the kindling in our hearts, that we may be revived again today and again tomorrow, and again all the days hereafter. Amen. Welcome to Cross Street Chapel. Good morning. Whether this is your first time or your 1,000th time stepping through our doors, I'm grateful for your presence here. I'm grateful for those who are listening and watching online, that we can be this sort of grand and wide community. It speaks to our values of care and compassion and tolerance and the freedom for our own expression and search for growth. Whatever it is that has brought you into this space, be it a space for tears and sadness, for joy and laughter, a place to hear perhaps a few words of wisdom, or maybe just a place to rest with the divine. Whatever you have come seeking in this space, I hope it will be found. We, of course, began with the chalice lighting, which is a ritual enacted in Unitarian chapels, churches, and meeting houses around the world today, connecting us to all of them. But we also come into our own time of worship with these words of the performance artist Marina Abramovic. We always strive to the future, or we yearn for something in the past, but we spend very little time in the present. So here we are today. May we, over this next hour, spend some time together, spend some time with ourselves in that much-needed presence. And we begin by singing our first hymn in the Purple Book, number 175, Richard Boeke's To Seek and Find Our Natural Mind, hymn number 175. Thank you. You may sit. Let us turn now to a time of prayer with these words of George Appleton. This is concluded by our covenant, which again is in your order of worship and will appear on screen for those who are listening and watching online. O Spirit of God, set at rest the crowded, hurrying, anxious thoughts within our minds and hearts. Let the peace and quiet of your presence take possession of us. Help us to rest, to relax, to become open and receptive to you. You know our inmost spirits, the hidden, unconscious life within us, the forgotten memories of hurts and fears, the frustrated desires, the unresolved tensions and dilemmas. Cleanse and sweeten the springs of our being, that freedom, life, and love may flow into both our conscious and hidden life. Amen. And so we turn to our covenant. We gather here in sacred fellowship to witness the fullness of our lives and all life, to hold and be held, tell stories and listen, to be renewed and renew the world. We speak with care and patience. We act with gentleness and compassion. We forgive each other and ourselves. In faith that we build beloved community, we renew our covenant today. Amen. I was conflicted when choosing my first reading or story today, knowing the continued invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And you see, certainly, amongst, for instance, in classical music, there's a lot of conversation around the engagement with artists and how one sort of, we don't want to fall into conversation about cancel culture. I'm not trying to engage in that, but I did, I felt very much pulled to Tolstoy's story, which I've read here before. And what I was thinking of is his own sort of positioning in the story of Russia and Ukraine, because he was influential in Ukrainian literature, and as well sort of his speaking for the peasants in his time, and our reflection on seeing the people in Russia who are, stepping up and protesting the war amidst great sacrifice on their own end and their own part. I often have also difficulties reading Tolstoy here because it's extremely long, and very much it encompasses. If I read it out completely, it would be the length of a full sermon, and I've done that before. But today I wanted to just try and give as brief a synopsis of his story, 3 questions. And the story begins with a king, as many of these sort of great sort of folk stories do. And there was a king who wanted to be wise, and he wanted to treat his people well, and he wanted to ensure that he had a good legacy to follow on in his life. And he figured that to do that, he would have to answer 3 questions. Who is the most important person? When is the most important time? And what is the most important action? And he thought if he could answer those 3 questions, then he would be able to rule benevolently and carefully and tenderly and have a thriving kingdom. So he consulted all of his experts, all of the various people in his retinue and his kingdom, and he found all of their answers lacking. But he also eventually learned of a hermit who lived on the edge of his kingdom, and he thought this hermit might have the answers. So he set out with his guards, making the trek out to the wilderness. He eventually reaches the road where the hermit is to be living. He tells his guards to stay put because he figures this is one of those great heroes' quests that he must encounter the hermit on his own. So he goes to this shack, this small hut, and he sees the hermit, who is digging furrows in the ground. And he says to the hermit, "I'm the king. I want to rule benevolently, and I need to know the answer to 3 questions. Who is the most important person? When is the most important time? And what is the most important action? And the hermit doesn't say anything. He just keeps digging the furrows. And when he finishes a line, he goes and he starts another line. The king waits a little while and he asks the questions again. And again, the hermit provides no reply. And this carries on for quite some time. The day is progressing, and the king notices that the hermit is getting quite tired. So he takes the shovel from the hermit and he begins digging the furrows. Again, every so often stopping and turning to the hermit and saying, please answer these 3 questions. Who is the most important person? What is the most important action? And when is the most important time? But the hermit doesn't say anything. And the day continues and continues, and the sun begins to set. Nightfall starts to encroach. They're nearly finished digging the furrows in this field. And the king finally, finishing a furrow, says, look, I will ask you one more time, and then I will leave if you don't answer. Who is the most important person? When is the most important time? And what is the most important action? And the hermit looked out into the distance and pointed a finger and said, look over there. And the king looked, and they saw a man running to them. And the man was clutching his side. And when he got to the king and the hermit, he fell down. He was grasping for the king. And when he fell down, he could see that he'd been injured, that his side had been cut very badly. So the king, without thinking, picked him up, took him into the hut, took him to the hermit's bed, dressed his wounds and with bandages, gave water as best as he was able, and administered to this man's care through the course of the night, as long as he could. He'd been digging furrows all day. He was exhausted, and the king eventually collapsed himself into the night and into rest. So the king wakes up and finds this man looking at him. And before he's able to say anything, the man proclaims and asks for his forgiveness, asks the king to forgive this man. And the king's very confused and asks for the man to explain himself. So the man does explain that earlier in their lives, the king had killed the whole family of this man, and he'd taken possession of his land. And this had created a hatred and a vengeance in the man, and he had plotted to kill the king. And so, learning that the king would go and visit the hermit, he decided to set out, and he would hide in the bushes, and when the king returned from visiting the hermit, he would assault and kill the king. But the king never returned from visiting the hermit. And so instead, the guards eventually realized the man was in the bushes, and they attacked him, which then led him to run to the king and eventually, get the care and support, and was able to live because of the king's actions. So he's asking for the king's forgiveness for this hatred and vengeance that he had held in his heart that had nearly cost him his own life. And the king was deeply moved by this. Such empathy swelled in his heart that he promised to restore the lands and to encourage this man, to bring this man into his sort of retinue, into a position of power and economy. The man now being stable enough for the king to leave, he sets off. And he goes to the hermit, who's again outside, and says, I'm going to leave now, but I'm going to ask those 3 questions one more time. Who is the most important person? When is the most important time? And what is the most important action? And because I could not do justice to Tolstoy, I will let him finish the story. Do you not see, replied the hermit, if you had not pitied my weakness yesterday and had not dug these beds for me, but had gone your way, the man would have attacked you, and you would have repented of not having stayed with me. So the most important time was when you were digging the beds, and I was the most important person, and to do me good was your most important business. Afterwards, when that man ran towards us, the most important time was when you were attending on him. For if you had not bound up his wounds, he would have died without having made peace with you. So he was the most important person. And what you did for him was the most important business. Remember then, there is only one time that is important. Now. It is the most important time because it is the only time when we have any power. The most necessary person is the one with whom you are, for no one knows whether they will ever have dealings with anyone else. And the most important affair is to do that person good, because for that purpose alone were we sent into this life. 3 questions by Leo Tolstoy. You now have a chance to share your joys and your sorrows, your trials and your triumphs. If you wish to share these publicly, please come forward and light a candle. You don't have to come to this microphone, but we will have this microphone set up, so please do speak into the microphone so those listening online will be able to participate. And if you are online, you can write into the chat box and I will read out any joys or sorrows you may have. You're invited to light a candle in silence if you wish. And as always, know that your presence here, if you want to hold your joys and your sorrows in your heart, that your presence here is enough. So I'm going to light a candle of a continuous prayer for all those affected by the war in Ukraine.
This candle is for all the poor people in the world, in the poor countries, that are now starting to suffer as a result of the butterfly effect of the war. I mean, countries like Sri Lanka, for example, yesterday the petrol prices went through the roof, and it affected all the other parts of the economy, combined with Chinese debt. And in Lebanon, they've almost run out of wheat, and they've got to get it expensively, and it's going to make people starve. So anyway, it's for all these poor people. Thank you.
I light this candle for all humanity, all creation, across all lifetimes, space, dimension, times, and realities, for us all, one and all. Thank you.
I'm lighting this candle because last week I was fortunate enough to have a peaceful and productive week, and there are so many people in the world at the moment who aren't able to say the same. So I'm thankful, but I'll also continue to pray that it won't be too long before things return to some kind of hopefully better normality.
From Richard, please pray for my sister who has had problems with her chemotherapy treatment. From Catherine, light a candle of strength for my aunt, who will be having major hip surgery tomorrow. I hope she will get some relief from her pain and the recovery is bearable for her. And a candle for all those joys and sorrows here spoken, and those that remain silently in our hearts. Let us turn now to our second hymn in the Purple Book, number 173, though gathered here to celebrate, hymn number 173. Our second reading is entitled Flow, and it's from the book Quiet by Susan Cain, who's an American writer. The book's 10 years old. The subtitle is The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. I believe that an explanation for introverts who love their work may come from a very different line of research by the psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi on the state of being that he calls flow. Flow is an optimal state in which you feel totally engrossed in an activity, whether long-distance swimming or songwriting, sumo wrestling, or sex. In a state of flow, you're neither bored nor anxious, and you don't question your adequacy. Hours pass without your noticing. The key to flow is to pursue an activity for its own sake, not for the rewards it brings. Although flow does not depend on being an introvert or an extrovert, many of the flow experiences that Csikszentmihalyi writes about are solitary pursuits that have nothing to do with reward seeking. Reading, tending an orchard, solo ocean cruising. Flow often occurs, he writes, in conditions in which people become independent of the social environment to the degree that they no longer respond exclusively in terms of its rewards and punishments. To achieve such autonomy, a person has to learn to provide rewards to herself. In a sense, Csikszentmihalyi transcends Aristotle. He is telling us that there are some activities that are not about approach or avoidance, but about something deeper, the fulfillment that comes from absorption in an activity outside yourself. Psychological theories usually assume that we are motivated either by the need to eliminate an unpleasant condition, like hunger or fear. But in flow, a person could work around the clock for days on end, for no better reason than to keep on working. From Quiet by Susan Cain. Let us return now to a time of prayer. From the inexpressible silence comes the incommunicable noise, heard but unknown, voiced but broken. So much of the mystery baffles us, so much of ourselves baffles us. Provide us with the space and time to teach our tongues, so that what remains deep inside, yearning for release, for light and fresh air, is spoken. Spoken in love and safety and assurance that if it is true, will ring true, will resonate with others. From the darkness of the night, the coolness of the tomb, from the silence of the dead, we are told to live on in the clearness of the day, the warmth of spring, with our voices calling out in love and friendship. Amen. And so we enter into a period of silence for reflection, meditation, contemplation, and personal prayer. Thank you, Alan. Let us turn now to our next hymn, number 139, Ruth Duck's Sacred the Body, hymn number 139. Let's all take a moment and breathe. Let yourself breathe. Focus on the inhalation and the exhalation. And as you're breathing, pay attention to any tensions that might be in your body. For myself, it's my shoulders. I can go whole evenings, possibly whole days, not realizing just how rigidly I'm holding my shoulders. Explore your body as you breathe. Where is that tension? The back of your neck, your hands, maybe even the soles of your feet. Those can get surprisingly stressed. Let it go. Wherever you find these marks of stress, make a conscious decision right now to open up. How's your tummy? Another great place for that tension to reside. Are you holding it in? Just let it out. There's no judgments. Bodies are in many sizes, many shapes. I can easily forget how much stress is in me. I forget at least until it pours out. When I become irritable, or I snap at someone, or I feel at my wit's end. Rarely is the person who suffers my wrath the person who incubated it. And don't worry, that's not a warning. We're letting our tension out. After all, we witness in the news, in our lives, possibly even in our journeys here. I suspect there is a lot of tension to get out. And trust this space. It's a large room. Fill it up with all that dispelled angst. Sense and see it moving up amongst the lights into those fans so it can be drawn out. Just surviving carries with it stress and tension. We're asked in our day and age to compromise, and as adults we are expected to undergo tasks that we perhaps don't always like. Although the respites and those perfect days that our imaginations paint for each of us will be different between one and another, I suspect that all of us reside fairly far from that ideal. I consider myself an introvert. And this is why I thought it would be interesting to explore Susan Cain's book, Quiet. Through her interviews and research, she explores how introverts maintain and build energy through quiet pursuits, how they are able to compromise when undertaking an activity that carries with it some level of passion, for instance, preaching, or how society is constructed in relation to introverts. For instance, in one section, she describes a church that refuses to ordain introverts as ministers, arguing that Jesus, as someone, by the way, who was famous for just walking away and spending some time alone with God, arguing that Jesus was an extrovert, and so therefore all their ministers needed to be extroverts. Thankfully, such a litmus test did not exist for me. But the reading today, I think, is beneficial and it's relatable for many people, whatever their disposition. And she explores this concept of flow, as related by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. In flow, one sets aside those disruptions, those distractions, and manages to engage with an activity so wholeheartedly that they reach a deep level of connection. And as she says, it can be anything. Practicing a musical instrument, reading a book, going for a jog, motorcycle maintenance. Even relationships can have a flow to them. When we're deep in conversation and that time just magically seems to fly by. My image of an afterlife would be as blessed as that perpetual state of flow. In other writings, Mihaly tells us that flow can be achieved when we engage with something that is just beyond our level of expertise. Some skill that needs developing, but not so far advanced that we lose hope. If we are mountain climbing, it would be just that next handhold, the reaching ahead for another outcropping. If the challenge is not sufficient, then we are liable to become bored and distracted. As I said, if it is far beyond us, then we become dispirited. Perhaps we don't know how to proceed. The journey seems so far. But there is a sweet spot of challenge when something is beyond, but just a bit, and are stretching for it. The focus of practice on a difficult phrase, or the reflection on a sentence in a book that challenges our acquired wisdom. The stretching of our minds, bodies, and spirits, where the stress is, perversely enough, enjoyable. In his description of flow, people are likely to lose track of time, but in so doing, they are living in the present. They are feeling that nowness of experience. This is like that hermit's answer to Tolstoy's question, living in the now and doing good for the person that you are with. Do that and you'll be king, the sovereign over your life. By doing good for the person that you are with, you are living in the now. You are seeing the limits of your agency, the potential you can aspire to, your sphere of influence, and fulfilling some measure of care for the world. Let's take another breath. And we're not just letting out physical stress, physical tension. As you're breathing, feel all of those emotions that are built up, that you hold on to so tightly. Free yourselves of those. Let those go. Knowing that in this space, you are okay, you are held, and you are loved. It was by releasing that story that the man was able to ask for forgiveness and receive it. And it was by enlarging his heart that the king was able to ask for forgiveness and receive it. It was a mutual enterprise. We conclude with these words, again, of the performance artist Marina Abramovic. We always strive to the future, Or we yearn for something in the past, but we spend very little time in the present. Sometimes the future that we fixate on is so far away, there is no knowing if it will be our destination, our fate. Sometimes the past that we obsess over feels like a comforting memory in times of distress. Sometimes those we imagine helping our generations in the future. Other times we reflect on the people that we have helped or wish we had helped in the past. And so ahead and behind, afore and back, our pendulum swings. And when it does so, it spends so little time in that here and now, that place, that time where we have true agency. I don't know how to fix the world. Such a project is far beyond the scope of my small hands. But I can look to who is around me and help them. I can help them now. I hope such a humble aim my life may serve. For without it, how much further might I expect my actions to journey? How far will they go if I do not let them heal the broken hearts that are in my midst? Amen. A few notices before we sing our final hymn. There is tea and coffee after the service. Do we have anyone to assist with the tea and coffee? Thank you, Joe. If you're in need of pastoral care, please speak with me. You can write to me online at minister@crossstreetchapel.org.uk. You can write as well if you'd like to provide a reading or assist in the chapel, in such as greeting or providing flowers or helping with the coffee. We also have a sign-up sheet, which will be in the Percival suite for you to look over if you are interested in volunteering. And if you have just joined us, you're welcome as well to join our mailing list, again by writing to me or speaking with me at minister@crossstreetchapel.org.uk. We're grateful for any donations that can assist the mission of our chapel. If you're online, you can donate at tinyurl.com/crossstreetdonate, or we can write to me about setting up a standing order. If you're here in person, we have a retiring collection along with envelopes for gift aid if you're a UK taxpayer. We have envelopes available for one-off donations, and as well an envelope scheme if you are a regular contributor, where you get one envelope for each week of the year. There is a course this afternoon at 12:30, our Introduction to Unitarianism course, where we talk about the values of our faith, the history of our chapel, and so forth. All are welcome. We're grateful for newcomers that join us, but even if you're a long-comer, you're able to, hopefully we all learned something in this space. And then next week is our AGM, the 20th. It says on the notice on the back of your order of worship 12:30, but it's actually closer to 12 o'clock. There is a bring and share meal. So if you are attending, you don't have to participate in the meal. I know we're all at sort of various levels of hesitancy with regards to COVID. But if you wish to participate with the meal, please let us know as soon as possible what you wish to bring, as well as any dietary requirements that you may have. And a message will go out to everyone who's signed up for the meal. It will be very helpful for us to know who is attending the AGM. And then our lunchtime recital is the 25th, Friday at 1 p.m., featuring Alessandro Pompili on piano. Are there any notices from the congregation? Yes, Joe? Oh, thank you. Yes, for those who travel via the Mancunian Way, it will be closed next weekend. They didn't consult me about it. I'm very sorry. So they never consult me about it. They never did ask my opinion. I did at least used to get sort of mailers that would inform me when there were road closures. I'm hoping.
And maybe some of the trams, certainly from our direction, from Jordan Way, won't be operating next Sunday.
Thank you.
So it's buses for us.
So thank you. So there will hopefully be buses. The message here is to do your journey planning carefully next week. So we have to be quiet for AGM, but so please do attend. Is that it for the notices today? Let us then sing our final hymn, number 198, Carolyn McDade's "Well Builded Land." Barbara Zanotti and Carolyn McDade's "Well Builded Land." Thank you, Ellen, for the music. I thank Sonia and Joe for the flowers, Sonia for greeting, Joe for the IT, and the tea and coffee, all the letters. And thank you to all of you for creating and sharing worship today. We close with the words of Jean Olson. May we be brave enough to expose our aching woundedness and reveal our vulnerability. May we speak our deepest truths, knowing that they will change as we do. May we sing the music within us, composing our own melody, playing our song with all our heart. May we draw, paint, sculpt, and sew, showing the world our vision. May we write letters, poetry, biography, slogans, graffiti, the great novel, laying bare our words to love and hate. May we love, even though our hearts break again and again. And until the end of days, may our lives be filled with possibilities and courage. Amen.
Thank you, everyone.